Hey folks, welcome to the shop. Today we're going to be doing some spacers. I don't really recommend spacers if you can get away with them, but I'm going to tell you a little story today. So, I wanted to modify my bike, and I started off with a set of Super UTV Assassinator 29.5 by 10 R14s on Can-Am beadlocks. I thought that was a great start, and I knew there was some stuff behind that. I was going to do some clutches and things like that, but because I did this, and because this rim compared to the stock rim that comes with the 2018 XMR has a different back spacing, with combination of this tire, I started getting all sorts of rub in different spots. Okay, that's not a big deal. So I get talking to some people and I stumble upon the Super ATV A-arm kit. They are a high clearance A-arm kit, but they actually pull the hub forward 1.5 inches so that I could get away from the inner fender over there and stop some rub. What ended up happening is I did get away from that fender, which was great, but then I ran into the actual problem of this rim having a different back spacing, bringing the tire more into my fender. So now I'm rubbing on the back of the A-arm, I'm rubbing on the shock tower, and I'm rubbing right here. So that brings me to the spacers. So I'm going to try and pull this tire out an inch and see if I'm rubbing still or not. It might end up creating its own little problem, or it might not be enough and I need 2-inch spacers. So this is what happens when you try to do something a little different, and not a big deal. We're gonna try these out, and we're gonna keep going until it all just works. And we'll talk about spacers a little bit also, and why I'm not a huge fan of them, but I'm not worried in this application because they're essentially making up for what I lost in offset from the stock rims to these beadlocks. Also aesthetically, I'm not a huge fan of a chunk of aluminum showing back here, but not a big deal, and we'll get to it. So what we got here is 1-inch spacers. Now they're all aluminum. They're reasonably light. Between the 4 of them, they're actually heavier than a clutch that I just recently bought. You'll see that in a video coming up soon, but spacers can very easily be cheap and not precision, which is a very delicate scenario when you're dealing with the end of your wheel and your hub. Now, one thing I was recommended is to actually grab both of your hubs, or both of your spacers, sorry, and just to make sure that they're straight, put them back to back and make sure that everything's lined up that way. These ones here are actually made in China, but they're not as sketchy when it comes to an ATV application because they don't need to be hub centric or anything like that. They should still be balanced, but who knows what kind of a lathe or mill they're making these on. So just have a good look at them because they can very easily be out of touch. But everything seems to be pretty good. When we actually go to install them, the spacer fits over your hub with the 4 locations here, and these nuts that come with them, they have a bit of a taper to them, as you can see. Now when you put this over your original threads on your hub, these tapers meet up with the taper inside your actual spacer, and this is to kind of keep them in line and have a lot of contact surface between the hub and the actual spacer itself. So I do recommend a little bit of Loctite, and blue Loctite specifically. You don't want to weld it on with some red Loctite or something like that. And that's because you have to torque this to the hub and then torque your tire to this. And as a mechanic, it's recommended that you obviously run something and then retorque it. So the problem becomes you put this on and torque it to the original torque specs which Can-Am says 74. I think that's a little bit tight, which I keep saying, because you'll blow studs out pretty quick. I'll probably do somewhere between 60 and 70. And then you put your rim on, torque it down the same way. But then when you actually take it for a drive and you have to retorque it, you have to take your tire off, retorque the spacer, put your tire on, torque it, go for a ride, and torque the tire again. That is the quote-unquote professional way of doing it. So as you can see, it can get kind of annoying, and if you forget to retorque your spacer, well, as you can imagine, you can start having some problems pretty quick. The difference between these spacers and automotive spacers is they don't need to be hub-centric. And what that means is spacers on a truck or a car, if you were going to use them, which in Canada is technically illegal. The hub-centric portion means that this centerpiece here is perfectly matched to the hub end of your vehicle. This one doesn't need it because there's no hub end like a car or truck. It just needs to meet up properly and be all four of them the same, and make sure that these holes are actually lined up. Because if you have one that's milled or drilled off a little bit, it can throw everything out to lunch. So if you were having shaking problems or something like that after installing these can very easily be the issue. It seems like a lot to talk about for a little chunk of aluminum to give you some extra space, but you really need to consider how these are installed, and that's why I don't like them. But the reason, like I said earlier, that I'm not too sketched out is mostly because the offset difference between my stock rims and my new rims is actually basically an inch. So what you're essentially doing, if you install this on a stock rim, is you're extending the amount of rotational force at the end of your hub, which can be very hard on bearings, very hard on tie rods, all sorts of things like that. And in my scenario, I'm actually just making up for the stock location. So I'm not overly worried. If I do have to go to a 2-inch because this isn't enough, then everything I said basically comes true. That being said, in an off-road application, will you have problems? Most likely not, but you can. And the possibility is what you need to educate yourself about. So we're gonna put these on today, and I hope that they are enough. I might end up doing a 2-inch anyway, which could end up throwing new problems at me, and it never ends. So to my wife, I'm sorry that I keep getting more and more stuff, but it's the way she goes. And we're probably gonna run into the same thing with her bike over there when we go to modify that shortly too. So yeah, right on. The more you know, and we'll get to it. So I've got a 1-inch spacer on there, and now I don't rub on the shock tower. I don't rub on this front bit of plastic, but I do rub on the back of the bottom A-arm still, and it looks like it'll take a 2-inch to clear it. Never ends. So I'll see if I can trade these 1 inches for 2 inches, and I should clear then. I really didn't want to go to 2 inch, and I don't understand why I would need so much, but modifying, it's quite the story. So I'll continue this video when I have 2 inch spacers in my hand and see if that works. So as you can imagine, it's a whole other day, and I have the 1 inch spacers off, and now we're going to try 2 inch spacers to try to make everything work. I'm not very keen on 2 inch spacers. You're putting a lot of extra stress on wheel bearings and stuff like that, but I don't really have much of a choice until I sort out a few more things, and in the future I'll have this sorted out. But for now, so I can plow my driveway, I'm going to be running these, and if these don't clear, I'm in trouble. I got into a lot of trouble switching to the Can-Am bead locks. Not enough backspacing. So I'm going to slap these on. Just a reminder to make sure I use a little bit of blue Loctite. Ensure you're happy with your spacers. They can very easily be not a very fantastically balanced product. Just take your time, make sure they're on nice and straight. We'll check these out. So I've got the spacer on this side, and everything's actually clearing now. I'm not rubbing on the shock tower, I'm not rubbing on the front plastic or the back of the bottom A-arm. So everything's clearing now. I just got to set it down and torque this side. But just so you can see, here's a 2 inch spacer here. I just finished torquing this down. So I put a little bit of blue Loctite because I have trust issues with spacers. It's not a bad practice, but I torqued it. I don't go 74 foot-pounds. It's too tight and I blow wheel studs all the time. In this application, I go a little more than I do normal. I went to 70. I'm going to try that out. And I got a little blue Loctite, so that's on. And then I'm going to put the tires on and do my normal thing. And I'm going to put a little bit of anti-seize here. Yeah, and we'll try these out. So I know it's clearing now, and I can actually plow my driveway, which will be fantastic. And I'm sure the wife will be super happy about. So all I got to do is trim some plastic at the back. I'm going to wait for 2 more spacers, and I'll do the same thing in the rear, just because I want the machine to track the same front to back, and everything will be good that way. So I like to think of it as a temporary solution. Who knows what happens in the future, what I have to do, but right on, guys. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, just go ahead and ask. There's plenty of room in the comment section for you. So sweet, moving on.